7 years of Verve. Cray, cray. Yeah. It's funny, though. It only feels like 6.5, 6 2/3. It goes so fast. Thank you for filling out the survey. On the question, if you could change or add one thing about Verve, what would it be? I wrote, I wish the pastor would preach longer sermons and wear tighter pants. It will be interesting to me to see if anyone else put that or if it's just mine. We'll see. So, the series we're starting today, I think, is a great representation of why we started this church 7 years ago. But before we get into it, I want to tell you about something that happened to me in college. But first, I have to tell you, actually admit, I guess, something that happened in high school. The reason I have to admit it is because we're going to talk a little bit about science today. So, about a month into my junior year of high school, I marched into my guidance counselor's office and I announced, I am quitting chemistry. My guidance counselor tried to slow me down. He said, now wait a second. Why would you do that? And I said, because I hate learning about science. He said, now wait a second. Why do you hate learning about science? I said, because I'm not a nerd. It's true. He said, well, hold on. What if you have to take chemistry in college? I said, I'm not going to take chemistry in college. I'm going to law school. He said, well, hold on. What if one day when you're a lawyer, you need to know chemistry for one of your law cases? I said, then I will hire a nerd chemist. Drop the mic. Bam. Quit chemistry. And I was right. In college, I did not need to take chemistry. Never did. I did go on to law school, but I did not end up becoming a lawyer like I thought I would, and the reason is because of that something that happened to me in college. So I went off to college, was 18 years old, and I was always like an intellectually driven person. I guess there's lots of questions. I studied things, I read things, and so when I got to college, even though I was only 18, I was just very set in my ways. I knew what I believed and why I believed it, and then something happened to me that I never would have expected. I decided for the first time to consider faith, to investigate the evidence for faith. I had never gone to church my whole life. As far as I know, I didn't know a Christian, didn't know anything about God, but I decided that I was going to investigate religion, assuming it wasn't true and I could laugh at it. But several months later, something happened. I became a Christian. What's ironic is that what seems to be far more common is the exact opposite. Someone grew up going to church, goes off to college, and at college stops believing in God altogether. Perhaps there was a professor who mocked their belief in Jesus, or a group of friends who kind of led them away from a life of faith. And so this person goes off to college, but then starts getting turned off from church or bored of living the Christian life, or they have intellectual questions that they don't have any answers for, and so they just leave their Christianity behind. Me, I went off to college, never gone to church, started asking intellectual questions about faith, got answers using all the brain power and investigative research abilities I could muster up. I studied Christianity, I studied the other world religions, and I came to the conclusion that Christianity is true. It's true, and so I put my faith in Jesus, and to my great surprise, it led me out of boredom and into the most adventurous life I could have ever imagined for myself. Depending on where you're at, that story might lead you to some questions. Maybe you question whether there really could be evidence for the Christian faith, or perhaps you question my assertion that the Bible is true because maybe that's not what you assume about the Bible. Or it might be that you don't care whether it's true. You might say, well, fine, okay, so it's true for you. I have a different truth that I live by. But come on, we like to say things like that because it sounds tolerant, and tolerance is a good thing, and because it avoids confrontation, and that's a good thing. But we know that the world doesn't really work that way, right? If something is true, it's true for everyone. If it's false, it's false for everyone. If I say 2 + 2 = 5, and you say 2 + 2 = 3, and someone else says, no, 2 + 2 = 4, we can't all be right? One of those is true, and the rest are not true. We like to be inclusive about it, but truth by its very nature, unfortunately maybe, it excludes. It rules out whatever contradicts it. And it really doesn't matter whether we like it or not. Even if we don't like that, it doesn't matter. Like, you cannot like the law of gravity, but that does not make it not true. It doesn't make it not true for you. You can try to fight the law of gravity. You see that how far I got off the ground right there? I got up like about that far. But you're still going to fall to the ground, right? You can't fight it. It's just true. And I think we get that. I think some of us, though, we question whether that idea pertains to matters of faith. And there are a lot of people who think religion, well, you just kind of choose which one works for you. I've even heard it said that trying to prove one religion is right and the others are wrong is like trying to prove that chocolate ice cream tastes better than vanilla ice cream. It's like you can't prove it, it's just a preference. You can't prove your preference. But is that right? Is that right that faith or religion is just a person's preference, or is it a set of truth statements that we can believe or not believe, that we could prove are true or prove false? You know, it's interesting. In the past, the questions that non-believers wrestled with, if they chose to wrestle with questions at all, were questions like, is there a God? Is the Bible true? Was Jesus really the Son of God? But today there's a more basic question people tend to ask first. Is there such a thing as truth? Is there truth? And I think we all know there is, right? If we decided we're all going to vote on whether that direction is north or south, you know, we could vote on it, but we know it is either north or south or east or west. I have no idea what direction that is. but I think we struggle. It's like, well, yeah, because that's a fact kind of thing. We struggle to know, well, what lies within the realm of true or false, and what lies within the realm of opinion and preference. And that's why this series is so important, because we're going to search for truth together. Now, you may be convinced that you already know the truth. I respect that. I'm pretty convinced myself. And I realize that we may have different opinions about what truth looks like. And so here's all I ask of you during this 4-week series. You're already through week 1, so you're well on your way. Would you just come and listen with an open mind? And I promise, if you are an atheist or agnostic, I promise I'm not gonna hit you over the head with the Bible or back you into a corner or try to trick you into believing something you know isn't right. Let's just go on a journey together and let's see what happens. Today, I just want to ask you to consider taking one step, literally just one step, the step from being an atheist to being an agnostic. To get real clear on our terms, an atheist claims certainty about the absence of God. An agnostic claims the absence of certainty about God. Okay? Again, an atheist claims certainty about the absence of God. So they're sure there is no God. An agnostic claims the absence of certainty about God. They wouldn't say there is no God. They would say, I don't know. They might even say, I'm not sure that anyone could know. So if you are an atheist, and by the way, one of the really cool things about this church is for these 7 years of our existence, I think because we've created a very safe and loving place, we get lots of people who consider themselves atheists, lots. And so if you're here and you feel like I'm probably the only one who doesn't believe this, we get people from all over the belief spectrum. If you're here and you consider yourself an atheist, I am not going to ask you to give your life to Jesus in 30 minutes. If you're an atheist, I'm just hoping that you might take the step today as you leave to say, I actually can't be sure that there's not a God. Next week, we'll talk about the step of being an agnostic to being a deist. A deist would be someone who looks at the world and believes there's so much design in the world. There has to be a designer out there somewhere. I don't know that designer cares about us. I don't know if we can know him, but there must be something out there. And then the next week, we'll talk about taking the step to being a theist. Basically, a theist would believe that there is a designer and that we can know him. Maybe he's even the God of the Bible. And then the last week, we'll talk about how we might intellectually take the step of embracing Jesus and becoming a Christian. This is important not just for those of you who may not have a lot of faith right now, but it's especially important, I think, for those of us who do have faith. It's really important because we need to understand not just what we believe, but why we believe what we believe. If we have faith but can't explain why we believe, it just reinforces the cynicism of atheists who are like, you don't even know why you believe. And so we need to examine the facts. And we definitely don't need to be afraid of science. Like, oh, if we looked at science, we might end up losing our faith. No. And I realize I quit chemistry. I already confessed that. But I am not anti-science at all. That was a long time ago. In fact, I would say this. If our faith can't hold up under the microscope of science, then we should just all pack up and go home. I'm totally serious. If what we believe is true, well, then it goes hand in hand with science. I'd even say that science should be a tool to help us understand faith. Faith should be a tool to help us understand science. And truth is truth, right? That's north or south or east or west, whether we like it or not. And so truth is truth. So if science was able to show us that we are wrong, that we're not operating and worshiping within the realm of truth, then we're just wasting our time. I will quit my job and we can all go do something else. Like we could be watching basketball right now. I am so sad that I'm not watching basketball right now. I'd rather be with you, but just barely. And so like we could just go home and watch basketball today. So, by the way, let me just throw this at you. If you're here and you're like, I am a committed atheist, I am not so naive or so self-assured to think that I can totally convince you with 4 30-minute sermons. I get like 2 hours with you if you'll come for the 4 weeks of this series. 4 sermons from today, maybe you won't be ready to give your life and accept Jesus. I get that. But I think that at least I'm going to be able to show you that there is a very logical progression from atheism to Christianity. And to be someone who goes to church, even believes in Jesus, you do not have to check your brain at the door. Like you don't have to commit intellectual suicide to become a Christian. And I realize right now you may not agree with that, but I think if you come over the next 4 weeks, I think you might change your mind. So, if you don't believe, I want to show you a Bible verse that might surprise you. And it's a Bible verse that's really important to Christians. So Jesus said, and we'll put the Bible verses on the screen for you. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 22, verse 37, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, now check this, and all your mind. Your mind. God wants us to have an intellectual faith. And at our church, we are very interested in using our minds to know and love God. If you're someone who does believe, here's a verse from the Bible that should be very important to you and should guide how you proceed. 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 15 and 16 says, if someone asks you about your Christian hope, always be ready to explain it, but do this in a gentle and respectful way. And so we are supposed to be ready to give the intellectual reasons for the faith that we have. And I think this series is going to help us who do believe to do that. So, as I prepared for today, I asked myself this question. Typically, when someone chooses to be an atheist, why? Like, what leads someone to be an atheist? And I've got atheist family members, I've got atheist friends. There's actually an atheist club here in town. I've gone to several of their meetings and hung out with them, not because I wanted to argue with them, but because I wanted to know them and know why they believe what they believe, why they don't believe what they don't believe. And so what are the major objections people have to belief in God? Why do some people choose to be atheists? And I realize if you're an atheist right now, you're thinking, no, the better question is, why would anyone choose to believe in God? That's a fair question. We're going to talk about the next 3 weeks, especially next week. But today, let's start with this question. Why, when someone decides that there is not an eternal, unseen God, why do they come to that conclusion? First, there are intellectual barriers. Some suggest that only science yields truth. That if something cannot be experienced by the 5 senses, you can't touch it, smell it, hear it, then it's not truth. It's just conjecture, maybe even just fantasy. So some would even go so far as to say religion is for weak-minded people who need this imaginary friend to help them get through the day and sleep at night. And so you do have some educated people who would say the universe is the product of random chance and evolution. God cannot be seen, and so there is no concrete evidence to suggest that he exists at all. Okay? Second, there are emotional barriers which lead some to reject the concept of God. People wrestle with questions like, how could there be a God when there is so much suffering in this world? Man, I look at Christians and so many of them seem to be hypocrites. The idea that there's a loving God who sends people to hell makes no sense, and I cannot believe in a God like that. Religion has caused so many wars, so much pain in this world. Like, how can you believe in God? You know, I tried praying when I was younger, and it did not work, and so I gave up on the idea of God. What about priests who take advantage of little kids? What about that? I had a pastor when I was younger, and I asked some questions, some intellectual questions about faith, and he dismissed my questions, wouldn't give me any answers. And so there's these emotional barriers. It seems that often people who are most hostile to the idea of God or to Christianity are those who have been deeply hurt in life, and especially hurt by someone claiming to be a Christian. And I totally understand that. I get it. I think if the same thing happened to me, I probably would end up in that same place. And if that's you, thank you for being here today. And I don't know if it's appropriate to do this, but I don't know if you can apologize for someone else. But I would like to apologize and say I am so sorry if someone who claimed to represent God misrepresented him to you. I am so sorry for any hypocrisy that you've seen in the church or in me. I am so sorry for the damage that supposed believers have done, often in the name of Jesus. And though I do understand why you've come to the conclusion you've come to, I hope maybe you'll realize that perhaps your opposition to the idea of God might be driven more than you realize by feelings about experiences you've had, and that maybe you'll be open intellectually to reconsidering the possibility that there is a God, and maybe even that Jesus was actually his son. Third, honestly, some people choose atheism because they have lifestyle barriers to faith. Some people have committed themselves to a lifestyle that they know is contrary to the teachings of God in the Bible, and it's easier to not believe in God than to deal with the implications of what it would mean to consider the possibility that God really does exist. And so it's like they have no interest in a God who would interfere with their lifestyle. Does that make sense? So it might be issues of morality, and so it's like, no, if I believed in God, that might mess with my sex life. I ain't doing it, or I'm going to keep taking coke, and so if there's a God who would say that's wrong, I'd rather not even know that there's a God. But it can also be issues of pride. Pride. It takes humility to consider the possibility that there is a God who is greater than you, and who you should submit your life to. That's really hard for some people. Or it takes humility to seek truth and embrace a belief in God when maybe your family, your friends, your coworkers all dismiss the idea of God. So, why does someone decide that there is no possibility of an existence of any kind of unseen eternal God? Well, it might be intellectual opposition, it could be emotional barriers, or sometimes it's the result of lifestyle issues. I want to say this, and it's important to me. I'm not interested in debating at all. I'm not interested in debating at all. Jesus said that Christians would be known for not their good arguments, but their love. And so my interest is loving people, not debating with them. But I do think it would be helpful in today's context to look at an intellectual issue that people struggle with or two. Now, immediately, when you say that, people want to talk about creation versus evolution. That either the universe is the result of God speaking it into existence, or it was created by random chance and evolved over millions and billions of years. I understand both of those belief systems, studied both of them, but I think that there is a more foundational issue than creation or evolution, and it's the question of origins. The problem is that jumping into the creation evolution debate is kind of like jumping into a Broadway play at scene 5. It's really hard to intelligently discuss scene 5 if you didn't see scenes 1 through 4, right? It's not fair. And so there are some more foundational questions that you really have to address before you can even get into the whole creation or evolution way of explaining the intricate nature of our universe. We could think of it like this. Let's say that you walked up to a pond, okay, and you looked down at the pond and you noticed on the pond some ripples, a series of concentric circles that were going out from a single point. Well, you would conclude that something struck the water and that started the ripple. You might even be able to trace the ripples, you probably could, to the first point of contact where they started. And so you could ask the question, what started the ripples? Maybe someone threw a rock into the water. Maybe a branch from a tree blew in and fell in the water. Maybe there was a turtle that popped its head out and went back on. There was acting right there. Do you see that little turtle? And he went up and then he came down. Thank you. And so you may not be sure what started the ripple, but you could talk about that, guess about that, and you could certainly see where it started, right? The creation evolution debate is an argument about, so what caused the ripples, right? What was the thing that caused the ripples that we can now see? Good question, but there's a question that has to precede the beginning of the ripples discussion, which is, where did the pond come from? How did water get there? And why does water ripple? Why does that even happen? And so to be intellectually comprehensive and intellectually fair, you can't really explain the ripples on the water until you figure out the source of the water and why water ripples. So, an atheist may believe in the Big Bang Theory. Okay, so do a lot of Bible-believing creationists. But everyone just needs to kind of slow down with their opinions because there's an origin question that precedes the Big Bang question, and it's this. So if there was a Big Bang, how did the Big Bang come about? What caused it? What was there or what was there not there before the Big Bang? How did all the vastness of the universe spring forth out of nothing? You probably remember from your science class in high school because you didn't drop out of chemistry in high school, right? Anyone else drop out of chemistry? Yeah, thank you for that hand. Thank you for that hand. So for those of us non-losers, the three of us who didn't drop out of chemistry, the rest of you remember that what we were taught in science, I took a little bit of science, is observation. Science is based on observation, right? For something to be in the realm of science, it has to be observable. And so what you do is you form a hypothesis as a scientist, you carry out observable experiments, you look at the results, and then you draw conclusions based on the tangible evidence that you have seen. Here's the problem. Origins are, by their nature, unobservable. Right? No one was there to see it. And so the scientific method cannot apply to the question of the origin of the universe, which means that no matter what you believe about the origin of the universe, it is a faith decision on your part. It's a faith decision. As limited human beings, no one possesses the kind of knowledge that can prove scientifically whether God exists or doesn't exist. It's a question that science just cannot apply to. That's not what science is. The reality is we all have a gap in our knowledge. And so no matter what we choose to believe to fill in that gap, it's faith. You are having a faith decision to cover the gap of knowledge that we don't know about. I mean, what you do is you gain all the knowledge you can, and you consider it all to the best of your ability, and then based on what you know, based on the best probability from what you've been able to look at, you take a step of faith. The truth is, whether you're a creationist who believes that God created the universe, or an evolutionist who believes there is no God, the universe came about through random chance and evolution, either way, the truth is, it requires a step of faith. That's why, if you walked in here today considering yourself an atheist, I would ask you, I hope politely, I would ask you to take the step of being an agnostic instead. To admit, I can't know for sure. that there's no God. When it comes to all this, like, for instance, to the origin of the universe, it's really not faith versus facts. It's just not. It's faith versus faith. If an atheist says he is 100% sure there is no God, whether he intends to or not, what he's doing is claiming absolute knowledge of all things. The only way you can know there is no God is to know everything. So really, the only one who can truly be an atheist is God, right? Because he knows everything, but God, I don't think, could be an atheist. I want to give you kind of an illustration of this. It's a little bit silly, but maybe it will help. I need a volunteer to do this. It's going to be super easy. Come on up. Let's all hear it for look at you. Nice jump. What's your name, sir? Joshua. This is Joshua. Joshua, here's the deal. I have in this bag M&Ms, at least as far as you know, okay? The question is this. Is there a green M&M in this bag, okay? So, what does he have to do? Well, he doesn't know because he can't see inside that bag. And so, if there's any knowledge or evidence you have, you might consider the possibility, does Vince, is he the kind of guy who would eat the green M&Ms first? And all you can do really is guess. So, what do you think? Would you say that there is or is not a green M&M in this bag?
I don't know if you dumped the entire bag in or if you removed all the green M&Ms.
I'm not telling you, buddy. That's the right question. But, so what do you just take your best guess? No green M&M? Let's find out. I actually don't know either. The truth is, there is not. It is a Verve color of red and kind of black. It's the Verve anniversary bag of M&Ms. Thank you for, you were right. Good job. And thank you. You can have those M&Ms. You can eat them, but I licked one of them. So, I don't know. Thank you very much for helping us. So he was exactly right. It's like, unless he can look in the bag, it's like, I can't know. I'd have to see all the M&Ms to know the answer. You have to have complete knowledge of all the M&Ms to be sure. And you can't, right? You can't be sure that there is no God that could possibly exist somewhere in the universe. You might say, well, I've looked for God. Maybe God is in the one place you haven't looked yet. And so whether or not God exists, it's just not a scientific question because it's not observable. And so what you would do instead is you would use what would be called in a courtroom, like beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's what they do in law cases where there were no witnesses, so we don't know 100% for sure. You take all the evidence you can get, you look at it as carefully as you can, and then you come to the most probable conclusion. That's what we're going to do the next 3 weeks. Okay, we're gonna look at all the evidence we can and see what the most probable conclusion is. We're gonna ask some questions. Questions like whether something could come from nothing, whether everything could appear out of nowhere, whether the source of stuff had to be eternal or maybe not, and whether if it had to be eternal, is God the most probable eternal source, or maybe there's something else. That's what's coming. But if you walked in here today an atheist, I wonder if you'd be willing today to just say, okay, I'm not sure. I can't be 100% sure that there is no God. I still would guess there's not, but I can't be sure. Which, if that's true, that would make you an agnostic. An agnostic said, I can't be 100% sure. And so I'm hoping that maybe today you say, I can take that one step. I'm with you. I don't know for sure. And would you be willing to come back? We've got 3 more weeks of the series. Would you be willing to come back next week as we continue the discussion? And I really hope you will. And I'm not going to lie to you. The reason I hope you will is because I do believe in God. And I believe God loves you. And what that means is I love you. And I want you to know God and to experience His love. Maybe if you are an atheist, maybe you've gotten the impression that from someone who calls himself a Christian, that Christians hate atheists or oppose atheists or wish the atheists would just shut up and go away. Nothing could be further from the truth. And I'm sorry if you've gotten that impression. What I believe about you and what anyone who believes the Bible would believe about you is that you are loved by God. That He has so much love for you and such a great life for you. And I don't want you to miss any of it. And believing that, it would be unconscionable for me to keep what I believe to myself. Right? I have to share it with you. And so I hope you'll come back and we will very respectfully talk about possible next steps. If you do believe, I hope you come back. And again, because we need to know why we believe, not just what we believe, but also I hope you maybe think this week about who should I bring back with me? Is there someone I should bring with me? And if you're like, oh, they missed the first week, you can have them watch it or listen to it on our website. We talk at Verve about having 3 people, and we want to do this with everybody, but having 3 people we're focused on serving and loving and blessing. And maybe there's one of your 3 or 2 of your 3 that you're like, they need to hear this. They would actually really like this kind of intellectual approach. And so invite them. And speaking of inviting, we are 4 weeks from Easter. It is the best time for people to get invited to church, that they're most open to going usually. And so be thinking about getting all 3 of your 3 here. For now, we're going to pray. And I realize if you're somebody who comes here all the time, you're like, this is different. Like today was really, brainy instead of fun and stuff like that. I'm sorry, hopefully it was helpful. But you did get to see a turtle come out of the water and go back down. So don't forget that. If you're like, it wasn't as fun as normal, you saw some acting. Turtle. So, hey, let's pray together and then we'll close up. Yeah, I love the opening song we did today, Heaven, Let Your Light Shine Down. Really, I think that song is a prayer. It's a prayer, and it's the prayer I want to pray right now. God, would you let your light shine down? And that we all have way more in common than we think we do. We're all journeying through life, trying to figure it out. That we all have struggles, including with faith. Some of us might say, I don't believe at all. Some of us might say, I believe, but there's always going to be times where I wonder, am I crazy for believing? Am I right? Are there questions I can't handle? If I really, talk to a scientist, would they know things I haven't thought about? And so, God, would you just let your light shine down? Would you use this series, and even more, would you work in our lives outside of this building, outside of Sunday mornings, to help us to know you, to experience you and your love? Shine down, God. Help us to know you. Help us to grow in our faith and take next steps. And I pray all that in Jesus' name. Amen.